In this video, we'll talk about the Moodle Gradebook, and I'll show you how to do some basic gradebook setup. When we're setting up a gradebook, the first thing I always do is open up the course grading scheme. Usually that means opening up the syllabus and looking at how the final grade is calculated. What I have here is just an example, and this is the most common grading scheme I see, which is using percentages to represent weights of items in the course. So when we're looking at this grading scheme, I know that in Moodle, I'm going to need a gradebook that is set to weighted mean of grades, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And here's what I'm looking at. So these are the course components. In Moodle language, those are going to be called categories. Categories in Moodle are like folders. So they are these buckets that contain other things inside of them. So those are categories. And then the other concept you need to become familiar with the Moodle Gradebook are items. Items go inside of categories. So items are usually the discrete activity or assignment that students are working on. So attendance and participation, that's a category. It's an overall folder that is going to contain many items. So the items contained within that category, I know from the syllabus that there will be Moodle discussion forums, but there might be something else. And so I would ask the person I'm working with, what else is in that category? What else makes up that 30% of the course grade? Because those will all need to be individual items. The weekly reading response papers are also items. From this quick look at the syllabus, I don't know how many there are, so I would have to talk to someone about that. But I know that all of the weekly reading response paper assignments will need to go into that category, and that all together, those items are worth 20% of the overall course grade. The midterm exam is both a category and an item potentially, and I'll show you how to handle that in Moodle. But if it's just one component, so if it's just one thing that's worth 10%, that one exam, we can put it into the overall course as an item. And for these last two, again, I would need some more information about what items might be contained within those categories. If it's just one thing, if the teaching presentation is one cumulative grade that's going to be worth 15%, it can be an individual item in the gradebook. So before I talk too much about this, let me show you what I mean. Here I am in my example Moodle course, and to access the gradebook, I'm going to click on Grades over here on the left-hand side. This brings me to the grader report, and the way that I think about the grader report is that this is the outward-facing portion of the gradebook. I don't have much in the course yet, and so I don't have much here in the gradebook, but as I build it out, you'll see that this will grow. This is where students will see their grades and where you will see all of the grades that you've given for students, as well as how those grades are adding up. So ultimately, the course total. This is the outward-facing portion, but what we need to do right now is to set up our gradebook to do the math for us. And to do that, we need to go into the gradebook setup. So that sort of goes inside the gradebook. So here in the gradebook setup, again, you'll see that as we build out the gradebook, this will grow. We have our parent course category, that'll be the name of the course, and then we have the course total. The course total is going to be aggregated automatically based on the way that we configure everything else in the gradebook. So you almost never want to edit this calculation. Email us if you ever have any questions or think that you want to, because usually what you actually need to do is change some settings elsewhere in the gradebook setup. So right now, our gradebook, the default is set to simple weighted mean of grades. That's a default aggregation method. But if you remember from our grading scheme that we looked at, that's not going to work for us because we need weighted mean of grades. We need these to have weights because we have these percentages. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the overall aggregation method of the gradebook. So I click on that parent course category. I'm going to click Edit, Edit Settings. The first thing I do when I open up a page like this in Moodle, is I just show more. I want to just be able to look at everything. The category name, I don't need to touch that because that's just the name of the course, but I do need to alter this setting. So the aggregation method, I'm going to change that to weighted mean of grades. So if you have a grading scheme that looks like this, where you have course components that have percentages to give that weight, then you probably will also want to use weighted mean of grades. This is the most common grading scheme that we see. There are a lot of settings on this page, and I'll go into those in more detail in another video. So for now, I'm just going to click Save Changes. So I now have my weighted mean of grades, and I'm ready to start building out my gradebook. So again, I always open up the syllabus and look at the grading scheme. So I look at my first course component, and we know that I'm going to need a category, right? Because I need a folder, I need a way to organize the items in this category. So attendance and participation is my first category. Down here, I have a grade, add a grade item or add a category. You can just ignore add outcome item. So I'm going to add a category, and this is called attendance and participation. It's really important to name your categories exactly what they're called on your syllabus, so that that's just in alignment for students so they understand what they're seeing. And note that you can change the aggregation method for this particular category, and there sometimes is a reason that you would want to do so. For now, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as is, but note that every category can have its own aggregation method. So I've created my category, and I'm going to click Save Changes. So there we go. I have my attendance and participation category. And now note that the weight is set to 0. So that's not good. Anytime you see a weight set to 0, it means that that category or that item is not going to aggregate as part of the total. And I know that I need a weight of 30. So I'm going to change this to 30. I'm going to click Save Changes. My next category is weekly reading response papers. So I'm going to add a category. And I'm going to save changes. And here, I need that to be 20%. So you'll note that I'm just putting in 30 and 20. You could also put 0.3, so long as you do that consistently, so 0.2. And anytime you make changes on this page, make sure you click Save Changes. I'm going to pause here, build out the rest of these categories, and then we'll talk about items. Okay, so I have built out my categories. So remember, this is my grading scheme, and now I have that reflected right here in the gradebook setup with all of these categories. Now I'm ready to start adding items. Now, let me show you. So the first thing I need to think about with items is this item coming from an activity in Moodle, or is this item coming from somewhere else? If it's coming from an activity in Moodle, then it is going to automatically appear here in the gradebook. So let me start with that example. So I know I have my attendance and participation, and that's going to be coming from Moodle discussion forums. I'm here in the gradebook setup, but what's going to happen actually in practice is that when I'm creating my discussion forums, so I'm going to turn editing on, I'm going to make a really, really quick discussion forum. So I'm choosing forum. I'm going to name it something. And then you can learn how to set up a forum in another video we have. But here, what's important is this whole forum grading. So for the grade, I'm going to be using point. I'll just keep the maximum grade at 100. That's fine. And then I just want to note while you're here with me that for every activity in Moodle, there's also a grade category. And the default is not categorized. But if you already have categories in your gradebook, you can put this item into that category. So I'm going to put that right into attendance and participation, into that category. If you don't have your category set up yet, you can always move items into categories. But once you have them, it's nice because you can just put it right in there. It just saves you a couple of clicks. And I'm just going to save that forum. So again, I did that because this is an activity in Moodle that students are going to be graded on, and that grade is going to aggregate as part of an overall category. So as part of that attendance, I'm going to go back to my gradebook, and I'm dropped off at the grader report. You can see that the grader report looks a little bit different now because I've added all of my categories to it. So we're really starting to build that out. And I can see the forum is right there. So again, I'm going to go into my setup because I'm really interested in telling Moodle how to do this math. And there I see it. So there's the grade item that I just created, represented here in the gradebook. So that's one way to create an item in the Moodle gradebook, is that when you have an activity from the main course page, it's going to automatically appear here. If the item was not categorized, then I can always move that gradebook item. So I would click on the item, and then I would say where I want it to go. That's one way to move it. So if I wanted to move that item into the parent course category, I could do that. I can also select here or select multiple items, and then I can move selected items too, and this belongs in attendance and participation. So that's probably in an online or hybrid course the most common way that you will add items to grade categories. Is that they will be coming in from some sort of Moodle activity, whether that's an assignment or a quiz or a discussion forum. And then you'll really just be sort of making sure that they're represented and they're in the right place here in the gradebook setup. Another way that I want to point out to you is what we call a manual grade item. So let's say that you want to give a holistic participation grade that's coming from some way that you're evaluating student participation, but it's not tied to a specific activity in Moodle. So that's a good use for a manual grade item. So down here, I'm going to click Add Grade Item. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to click Show More. And you'll see that I can also input a different maximum grade. So whatever the grade is for this item, I'll just keep it at 100. But if you did want to change it, that's where you would do so. And then also here, note that I get to choose what grade category I want to put this item in. I want this to go into the attendance and participation category. So I'm going to say that right there. So I put that into attendance and participation, and there it is. So the participation grade, you'll note that a manual grade item looks a little bit different. When it comes from an activity in Moodle, you see the activity icon. Manual grade items just have this little box. And then I would, of course, need to continue building this all out. For activities in Moodle, that might take some time as you're building those, all of your assignments and all of your forums. And for those, you just want to remember to put them in the right category, or at least go back into the gradebook setup and put them in the right category after you've created them. Now I want to draw your attention to something, a pretty common thing that comes up. So the midterm exam, we created this as a category because it's right here on our grading scheme. But after talking with someone, or what you should think about for your class, the midterm exam is actually only one thing. So let's say that's an exam that students are taking in some way. It could be a quiz in Moodle, and that would just be the one item that would come into the Moodle gradebook from your main course page. Just to demo for you, I'm going to make a manual grade item. So you have two options with that. You can add the grade item. And click Save Changes. So I can add the grade item, and I can move it into that category. And that'll work just fine. It's a little redundant, however, because this category isn't actually doing much. A category is designed to hold multiple items, and this is really just one item. So I'm going to show you another way. I have this item, so this is my midterm exam. For now, I'm just going to plop it here in the main, the parent course category. So what I could do is I actually don't necessarily need a category because there's just that one item that represents that whole category. So I can delete that category. Yep. And then this item, this midterm exam item, I can change the weight of that to 10, clicking Save Changes. And of course I'm doing that because the midterm exam is worth 10% of the overall course grade. So there's the midterm exam. If I want to move that, if I want it to be in the same order as it is in the grading scheme, I can of course also do that by moving in this way that I've been demoing for you. And there's my midterm exam. So that's just an example of when you might not need a category and you just need an item because that whole component is made up of one grade in aggregate. And then finally, with the teaching presentation and the final project, so the teaching presentation and final project, I would just want to ask questions. For example, what makes up that grade? What goes into that? So let's say that the teaching presentation has a, let's say that it has a first draft item. And this is actually a good example. I forgot on that past page, I forgot to put that in the proper category. So it just dropped it right here into the parent course category. So I'm actually going to move that into the teaching presentation category. So I have my first draft of the teaching presentation, and then let's say that there's the presentation itself. And then here I'm going to remember to put that into the category where I want it to go because I like to save myself clicks. Okay, so I've got my teaching presentation, I've got the first draft, and I've got the presentation. The way that this is currently set up is that these are weighted equally to each other. So overall this is 15%. That means that right now the first draft is 7.5% and the presentation is 7.5%. That's probably not what I want or what you would want in this situation. The first draft is probably going to be worth a little bit less. So to handle that, I'm going to go back into this category for teaching presentation. I'm going to click edit and edit settings for that category. And I'm actually going to change the aggregation method. I'm going to change it to weighted mean of grades, just like we did when we set up our overall gradebook. And I'm going to click Save Changes. And I'll show you what changes on the page. So what just changed for me here is that I got this column for weights, and that's what happens when you change to weighted mean of grades. So I actually want the first draft to be worth 20%, and I want the presentation to be worth 80% of that 15%, and that's really crucial, right? Because these two items are contained within that category. So anytime I make a change on this page, I need to click Save Changes here. But I wanted to demo that for you because I wanted to show you that within categories, you can change the aggregation method and you can make sure that things have different weights. So the simple weighted mean of grades is great when everything is weighted equally to itself within that category. But if not, then you will want to change the weights for an individual category. Now we're going to look at another possible grading scheme that you're using, and this will be using what's called natural weighting in Moodle. So this is where you have basically the sum of all possible points in the class. So in this grading scheme, you can see that there's going to be 10 forums that will each be worth 10 points. So there's 100 possible forum points, 100 total possible forum points. And then you're adding those all up and showing the total possible points for the class. So I'm going to show you how to build this in the Moodle Gradebook. Here I am in my example Moodle course, and I'm going to show you how to set up a grading scheme that looks like this. We're going to be using natural as our aggregation method. So this is the sum of all points in a class. So I'm going to click on grades to open up the Gradebook grader report. And then I need to go to setup. So in the Gradebook setup, the first thing I'm going to do is change the aggregation method because I know that I need natural, which is the sum of all points in the course. I'm going to click on edit and edit settings for the parent course category. And then I'm going to change the aggregation method here to natural. And then click Save Changes. Okay. So you'll see that my course total has changed a little bit, so it's going to be the sum of all points. There is currently nothing in the class, so currently the max grade is 0, but you'll see as I start to build things out, that will increase. So I'm pulling up my grading scheme, and I know that I have 10 forums worth 10 points each, and that's going to be 100 points total. So I have to build out those 10 forums. So this course really doesn't have anything in it yet. Now we talked about this when I talked about how to set up weighted mean of grades, but I'm going to reiterate it here. If you have an item, a grade item that's going to draw from an activity in Moodle, then that has to be set up on the main course page, not directly here in the gradebook. So these forums, let's imagine that I want them to be discussion forums. They have to be set up through the activity, and the grade will draw in from the main course page. So I turned editing on. I'm going to add an activity or resource. I actually have a forum 1 that I'm going to modify the grade. I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to add a forum 2. We'll just pretend this is forum 2. I'm not going to go through all the steps of configuring this forum. I just want to get right to looking at the grade. So I'm going to go down to whole forum grading, and I'm going to choose points. Now this is really important for natural. The maximum grade for these forums is definitely not 100, right? Altogether they're worth 100, but each one is worth 10. So I have to change the maximum grade. And with natural, I'm usually not using categories, so I don't have to worry about the grade category. So I'm changing the max grade to 10, and that's crucial. You have to remember to change the maximum grade with natural, or your math is not going to work correctly. So I'm going to save that and return to course. And just because I have a forum 1 here that is currently ungraded, I'm going to quickly jump in there and I'm going to set that to be graded. So I'm going to just set that again to points, and then the maximum grade again, I have to change that to 10 because my forums are worth 10. And that's just because I want. Sorry about the little glitch in my video. So I'm going to go back into the gradebook. I saved my forum. And again, it brings me the grader report, but I want to look at the setup. And here we go. So you'll see that I have my 2 forums, and those are items that are coming from the main course page. The max grade is 10, and then you can see that the course total is currently 20. Because obviously I have to build up to that course total. What you're also going to find is that these weights shift as you build out more items. So checking in with my grading scheme, obviously I need to build all of this out. All of these are individual items. Most of them are probably coming from Moodle. But let me show you an example. So the midterm exam is worth 100 points. And let's just pretend that this is something that students are not going to take in Moodle. They're going to do it in some other way, but you need to create a space for that grade here in the Moodle gradebook. So I'm going to add a manual grade item. So this is going to be the midterm exam. I'm going to show more for that item and just check in on the max grade. So the max grade is 100, and that is, if I believe, that is the max grade that I want. So I'm going to keep that at 100, and I'm going to click Save Changes. So I've added my midterm grade, and look at what's that's done. You'll notice that I'm not changing these weights. These are happening. This is all shifting automatically as I add items. And then also, of course, the course total has changed. I'm going to do one more. So let's say the teaching presentation, and let's just pretend I want another manual grade item. Although for most content in your online and hybrid courses, you're going to want items that come from Moodle activities, so that come from the main course page. So this is my teaching presentation. I did that a little bit fast. Sorry about that. Just show list. So I put in my name here, and then I do want to click show more, because remember the default max grade is 100, but for natural it's really important that we get the correct max grade. So the teaching presentation, the max grade is actually 150 points. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to click save changes. And you'll see that again, everything has shifted and my course total has increased. So now when you're using natural for your grading scheme, you will want to keep a very close eye on that course total, and make sure that the course total that shows here in Moodle is also what you expect it to be based on your syllabus and your grading scheme. I know this was a lot, and we are always happy to talk with you about your individual gradebook and help you work through these steps. So please send us an email at moodlehelp@berkshirecc.edu.